Alright people, I was gonna make this one into one video, but that didn't work so well, so welcome to part 1 I guess. Last year, I did a podcast about the best rebuilds, but like every podcast that I do, it's very disorganized, a little bit all over the place, as it is more a hockey conversation as opposed to structured video. So today, I'm going to attempt to give it some structure, but considering that teams are all in different stages of their rebuild, I will rank them as the team most likely to build a contender within the next 5 years or so. So please take the time to like and subscribe if you enjoy, and let's go. So there's basically 10 teams to talk about and rank here. I'm not going to include teams that have successfully rebuilt their team already, like New Jersey or the New York Rangers. I'm also not going to include teams that are not stuck in the middle but also not clearly rebuilding, like the Wilds and St. Louis Blues. And finally, teams that have just started their rebuild or should be starting their rebuild, like the Flames or Pittsburgh, aren't in there either. So now that we got this out the way, let's start with number 10. And the worst rebuild in this list, in my opinion, and I hope I'm wrong for the fan base, is Detroit. I think Detroit will be a playoff team starting soon, maybe even this season, but I don't think they will be looked at as a contending team. It's not impossible, but I wouldn't say that it's probable. They have a good enough roster with players like Raymond and Larkin and DeBrincat and JT Comfer up front, Moritz Seider and Simon Edvinsson as the top duo on the back end, and some good middle of the lineup players like Rasmussen and Andrew Kopp, who should all be there when it's time to compete, considering they are at the end of the rebuild because they're starting to be a little bit too good to pick high. They also have some solid players in the pipeline, but outside of Sandin Pellikka, I can't say that any of them are top 6 players or top 4 player for sure. Pellikka is looking like a sure shot top 4D who will man the first power play unit in the future, so that's a home run. They have a good center depth in the pipeline with Marco Kasper, Nate Danielson, and Dower Nilsson, but is really any of them a second line center on a contender? My opinion right now is no, but that could change. And they also have players like Branson Nygaard, Max Plant, William Verlander, who have some potential, especially Branson Nygaard. So the way I see it is that their star players are already in the NHL. Their star duo up front is Larkin and Raymond, and they will carry most of the offense with any winger given to them, but they don't really have a strong second duo in the making. Can a Danielson and Branson Nygaard duo be strong enough? They'll be hard to play against for sure, but that's missing some serious offensive creativity for a second line in my opinion. So in the end, they have a very good top line, a very good middle 6 lacking a strong second line though, an amazing top pair with a third D coming to anchor the second pair and QB the power play. Add to this Sebastian Cossa and Trey Augustine. Detroit are in a very good position to become a constant playoff team, but it's missing the star power up front to be a serious contender. They jumped the gun a little bit too fast in my opinion and focused a little too much on the hard to play against aspect, leaving them with no elite or high-end forwards to anchor that second line. And at the 9th position, I have the Philadelphia Flyers, and a bit like Detroit, they can have a very strong first line with Travis Konechny, Matvei Michkov, and Sean Couturier, but a lot of this depends on Sean. If he can come back anywhere near to what he once was, they have a fantastic top line. If not, they're in big trouble. Right now, they have some strong element up front to build a solid top 6 with Couturier, Konechny, Michkov, Owen Tippett, and Joel Farabee. They have some decent depth in the middle 6 with Frost and Tyson Forster. All players signed long-term or future RFAs who should be there when it's time to be competitive. And on defense, they have Ristolainen and Jamie Drysdale, who are good top 4 solutions. Sometimes they have Sanheim and Cam York, who are really good, but they don't have a Moritz Seider or a Simon Edvinsson in the NHL or in the pipeline. So while their defense is set to be deeper than Detroit, they don't have the same star power on the backhand. On the prospect side though, they have one major differentiator, and that player is Matvei Michkov. If you followed me for a little while, you know how much I love Michkov. I think he's a star. I think he will become one of the best winger in the NHL. So even though he's already started the year in the NHL and has shown to be excellent, this is just the beginning and he will transform this team offensively. But outside of him, they don't have much coming up offensively and no sure shot top 6 player. They're thin at the C position and they have guys like Jet Luchenko and Jack Berglund in the pipeline, but that's about it. They have Alex Chernik and Denver Barkey, who are both doing very well in their respective league, and Oliver Bonk, who's a big two-way right-shot defenseman who projects as a top 4. Overall, they have a solid top 6 in the making with a mix of veterans and players just entering their prime and a young future star. They still have some work to do to add some star power, and they probably need a first-line center type of prospect to get things going, but overall, I really like it. They are 9th because Couturier is a big question mark and he's signed for 6 more years. They'll need some depth and probably a number 1 D, but it wouldn't be impossible for Bonk to become a solid first pair D, and they have about $1 million first rounder and second rounder in the next draft to take care of all that. In the end, it's a well-constructed team, but there's no denying that the losing of Cutter Gauthier for Drysdale and finishing the last season 4 points out of the playoff will set them back a couple years. And the goalie situation is a little bit of a mess, and while I'm not a big Jarnison fan, Igor Zavragin has been fantastic in the KHL, even when playing for Sochi, which is no easy task whatsoever. And in the 8th place, I have the Ottawa Senator, and it's a bit of a shame because it's a beautifully constructed roster obtained through top-notch drafting with a few exceptions out there like Tyler Boucher, but it's still probably the best roster of all the teams in this list. The issue is that there's nothing significant coming up outside of Yakemchuk or maybe Zach Ostapchuk if you want to stretch it. Ottawa is the perfect example of what you don't want to do if you're rebuilding, giving up a young goalie in Gustafsson, trading 7th overall pick for DeBrincat when the team is definitely not there, trading another early first and second for Chikrin. It's like bad move after bad move, or not necessarily bad moves as the value was there, but precipitated moves for a team that wasn't ready to compete whatsoever. But with the Boucher pick, the DeBrincat trade, the Chikrin trade, they found themselves with 3 consecutive very high first round pick in the garbage for 2 players who are not on the team anymore just a few years later, and a player who's a 4th liner at the very best. And they have to forfeit either one of their first this year or the next one, so it's not looking good. But because of spectacular drafting and crafty trading in previous years, they found themselves with Ketchuk, Stutzla, Batherson, Pinto, and Norris in their top 6, Ostapchuk and Grigg in the middle 6, and they have Chabot and Sanderson as legit top pair options with Linus Ullmark in the net. You add to that the veterans they signed and traded for like Giroux, Perron, Amadio, Nick Jensen, and they have a strong roster that can reach the playoffs starting right now. The issue is that that's about as good as it's gonna get. Both Giroux and Perron are 36 years old, and while they won't be tied to the cap, they won't be swimming in money either with the new Ullmark contract. So solid top 6 with real star power in Ketchuk and Stutley and really good supporting cast in Pinto, Greg, and Patterson. But the pipeline is completely dry, and on the defensive side, they have Sanderson, who's a star, Chabot, who's also really good, and Yakemchuk coming up in the next few years, who's at the minimum a top 4D. So overall, a strong roster, but the worst pipeline of any rebuilding team by a significant margin. It's almost like their window is opening now and it closes down with Giroux. Not exactly an enviable position for a team that's rebuilding for like 7 or 8 years. And at number 7, I have the San Jose Sharks. Obviously, they drafted really high and really well in the last couple of years, but the roster is awful, and I don't know if their young player will come out of it unscathed. They have some of the best prospects, but they're so far from being good. They need so much more that they might turn out to be the next Buffalo Sabres. Let's hope not, but it's not something that's impossible. The Sabres, at some point, they have some of the best prospects in the hockey, including players like Jack Eichel, and they still haven't made the playoff like 3 decades later. Same with the Oilers. It took a player of McDavid level to get them out of their slump, even after drafting first overall like 10 times in a row. Rebuilding is more than just drafting the best player available. There's a certain balance to strike where you can't let your organization become a place where it's comfortable to lose. A team and team building has to be at the forefront to build something successful. At this moment, outside of Will Smith, who's been struggling hard in his first season, and William Eklund, who I've always been a fan of, there's not a single player worth talking that will be there when it's time to compete. Yes, they are starting to load up with prospect up front with players like Macklin Celebrini, who should be a top 15, top 10 center in the NHL at his peak, and others like Quentin Musty, Chernyshov, Bysted, Ramachevsky, Colin Graff, Kasper Aaltonen, who all have top 6 to middle 6 potential, They're not all gonna make it, but it looks like at some point in the future they'll have a deep and talented roster, but it's definitely missing some high-end top 6 options. Defensively, the only player I can say for sure that's going to be a top 4D and likely a first pair D in my opinion is Sam Dickinson. Everyone else from Shakir Mukamudalin, Luca Cagnoni, Leo Salin Valinas, Nate Miskey, they all have a certain potential, but none of them are sure shot top 4 defensemen on a contending team. So overall, there's a solid foundation of high-end prospect including Askarov in the net, but it's going to take years for them to add more star power up front and to build a high-caliber defensive prospect pool, and then everything has to gel together, and again it takes years of development for all those young players, especially the Ds, to get up to NHL speed and be effective defenders. So like I said, the foundation is solid, but there's a megaton of work left to do, and that takes time, which is why they are at the back of this ranking. And at number 6, I have the Columbus Blue Jacket, and I gotta admit that they are a bit of a tough evaluation. They have some, but they don't have that much coming up in the pipeline. But they have a lot of young and very good players at the NHL level already, like Kirill Marchenko or Cole Sillinger, who's better than what people think in my opinion, and also players like Shinikov. They also have some elite talent like Adam Fantilli and Ken Johnson, who unfortunately is injured after looking like he was breaking out. And they also have Sean Monahan, who's a gem. Probably not a point per game player like he is right now, but still a very solid player if he can stay healthy. On defense, they have Zach Werenski, who's an absolute stud, and Severson, who's also a very good top 4 option. So their NHL roster isn't that bad at all and isn't super young either. They have a good mix of mid-20s and some young prospect, which is a plus in my opinion. They're not just icing a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old. When it comes to the pipeline, it's good, but it's not great. Offensively, outside of Caden Lindstrom, if he ever comes back to play, it's very thin and also very small. Lots of players with middle 6 potential, but they're essentially all 5'9" or so. Lots of Dumais and Whitelaw and Pinelli and Brindley, who are good players but all very small. They also have players like Luca Del Belbeluz, who started the year on fire in the AHL. Defensively, they have Yurichek, who's taking some time to arrive at destination, but I have no doubt that he'll be a solid top 4 option, even maybe a first pair D, who can drive some offense. He just needs a little bit of time to cook, so be patient with him. He's got the tools to be very, very good. They also have players like Denton Matejchuk, who I just ranked 10th in my top 16 defenseman prospect video. So that's 2 solid pieces for the top 4, and they also have other defensive prospects like Svozil, Luca Merelli, Charlie Elick, Corson Kuliman in the pipeline, so depth, it shouldn't be an issue. So overall, it's looking good. It's going to take some time for all of this to form, but a center line of Fantilli, Caden Lindstrom, and maybe Cole Sillinger as a strong third line center is a fantastic and hard to play against center line. Add some wingers like Marchenko, Shinikov, and Ken Johnson, and that's a solid top 6. Probably need another high-end prospect or NHL player in there to make them a solid contender, but with Severson and Werenski already in the NHL and signed long-term, and with Yurichek slowly getting there, Matejchuk on his way, and also multiple other defensive prospects, this defense should also be a strength. In the end, a beautiful future for Columbus, and they're in great hands with Don Waddell. So that is it for today. Top 5 is coming out soon. It's already recorded. It just needs to be edited whenever I get a few hours. So as always, hope you enjoy. See you in the next one. Peace.